Thanks again for joining us and for taking the opportunity to engage with behavioral science research at KU once again. This week, our panelists are faculty, staff, and students who are conducting research that helps us to better understand the landscape of interpersonal understanding, student research, and compassionate community in the wake of COVID-19. My name is Emily Ryan. I am the director of the Commons at KU, and I will be hosting the conversation today with colleagues across disciplines at the university. We're co-hosting this discussion today with the Institute for Policy and Social Research, which has done an incredible job of tracking the impact of COVID-19 on the state of Kansas. They have in fact created a website with public access resources, which we'll share a link to in the chat, and I would encourage you to check that out. There's a lot of really informational videos there. So part of the work of the Commons is to help make high-level research accessible to public audiences and to do so in a cross-disciplinary context. So certainly the pandemic has created a context with unique urgency and complexity that requires experts from many fields to respond so that we might better understand its many dimensions. Today, we will hear from 5 researchers whose work has informed our understanding of what behavioral sciences are teaching us about the pandemic, what participatory modeling is and how it's used, ways that this work offers ideas for interpersonal understanding and policymaking, how this work engages communities and how it serves them, and opportunities for compassionate community on campus. Before I introduce my colleagues, I just want to share a couple of quick announcements for today's event. So first, you'll note that the presentation is being recorded and it will be made available for viewing on the Commons YouTube channel once it has been edited and captions have been added. Something strange just happened. Sorry about that. Second, captioning for this event is provided by Caption Associates. Our thanks to them for providing added accessibility to today's event. To access the captions, you can click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles. Finally, please use the Q&A button next to that to share your questions for the panelists. After each of them have spoken, we will have some dedicated time for audience questions, and we really want to be able to have a conversation. So please think about questions you'd like to ask, further clarification, anything that's coming to mind, and share them through the Q&A as you wish. At this point, it is my honor to introduce our speakers for today. So they will each speak for about 6 minutes, after which we will take questions. Dr. Vincent Francisco will be first, is a Kansas Health Foundation professor in the Department of Applied Behavioral Science and is a senior scientist at the Lifespan Institute at the University of Kansas, where he directs the Center for Community Health and Development. Dr. Francisco's research interests include community health, community development, substance abuse, chronic disease, HIV/AIDS, and youth violence. Next, we will hear from Dr. Kyle Metta, who is a postdoctoral fellow in community systems at the Center for Community Health and Development at the Lifespan Institute at the University of Kansas. Dr. Metta is a system scientist whose work examines how communities can use systems thinking and modeling to make positive change efforts. Dr. Metta's research interests include participatory modeling, community systems science toolkits, coordinating diverse knowledge, and working with communities to create problem statements and action plans. Then we'll hear from Megah Shah, who is a junior majoring in human biology and minoring in Spanish. She is currently a part of the University Honors Program and is also a university scholar. She is working with the Center for Community Health and Development as well. In the future, Megah hopes to attend optometry school. Then we will hear from Radhia Abdirahman, who is a junior studying global and international studies and human biology with an emphasis in applied behavioral science and a minor in African and African diasporic languages. She's working with the Center for Community Health and Development as a McNair Scholar and also as a student assistant with the Health, Humanities, and Arts Research Collaborative. Radhia was recently named KU's 2021 and 2022 Newman Civic Fellow, which recognizes change-making students who demonstrate commitment to their community and public problem solving. In the future, Radhia hopes to continue exploring the intersections of public health, culture, and community health. And finally, Dr. Ward Lyles is an associate professor in the School of Public Affairs and Administration at KU. His research interests focus on interactions of humans, natural environments, and built environments, with particular attention to increasing sustainability and compassion through decision-making. He explores local collaborative efforts to reduce risks from natural disasters and climate change impacts. He also represents the Center for Compassionate and Sustainable Communities at KU, which is a cross-disciplinary, collaborative research and programming team of students, staff, and faculty. We are really glad to have you all here today. At this point, I will turn it over to our first presenter and then ask them to just go one in turn without me interceding in between. So Dr. Francisco, if you're ready to go, I believe you can turn your video on.
I'm trying. I keep saying that it's off, that you've turned it off. Oh, here we go. Good enough. We got it. Thank you so much, Emily, and really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share the work that my colleagues have been pursuing for the past several months. Essentially, since the pandemic kind of came about and things have been progressing over time, one of the most important things we felt is to get the voice of the students at the table in a way that was really functional and would lead to the development or the empowerment of students to be able to get engaged in developing a more compassionate and successful community. Most all of the work that I've ever done in the past 30 years could be framed as community-based participatory research. A lot of folks look at it as service, but the reality is it's applied research and program development, and really is about engaging people in community to be able to empower their voice and empower their ability to be able to facilitate program policy and practice change. For the most part, practice change is one of those elusive things that people have a hard time getting their heads around, getting their arms around, but turns out to be the magic sauce. Turns out to be the sofrito that actually facilitates the working, the functionality of all the rest of the change that goes on. So in talking to our team, and in particular, talking to Ms. Abdirahman, the importance of the student voice and how it is that we engage the student voice was really clear and critical. And we, in talking about it over time, and with the facilitation of Dr. Metta, who's a postdoc working in our center, really wanted to build the capacity through participatory modeling. With that, I want to pass it on to Kyle to talk more about participatory modeling and then get to the really important stuff, which is the students and their voice. The work that they're doing is incredible, and it's going to be important to hear from them. So thank you all.
Okay, so I'm Kyle Metta, and I'm here to just talk a little bit about participatory modeling as a way to engage with communities, to think about complex problem solving, and as one of the modes to doing that. Let's see. Right. So systems modeling is a way to represent and make sense of complex systems and the complex problems that derive from them. And doing that in a participatory way is integrating systems modeling in a mode of participatory inquiry or research or practice. And it allows people to surface and integrate their collective knowledge and experiences into a formalized representation of that. And then the greatest part about this is that then you can use that model, that representation, with some mathematics to simulate, what if scenarios about actions that can be taken, what the outcomes might be, what is the system really sensitive to, and what futures could be like. And it allows us to come up with robust scientific conclusions in a costless way. And it also facilitates social learning. So there's this old adage in modeling, which is the one who models is the one who learns. So when people dive deep into these systems, they often are developing the most intuition about how that system operates, what the thresholds are, what are the effects. So by engaging with community stakeholders to build the models, to open up those black boxes and get in there and get their hands dirty, we facilitate the social learning of people who are trying to act in those systems. And then there's also the the issues of justice and buy-in. So when we're thinking about these complex problems, often it's a question of whose voice is being listened to and whose knowledge about the problem matters. And participatory modeling is one way to engage folks and bring in their voice into that conversation. And there's also a lot of research on stakeholder buy-in, that if they're engaged in the model creation, then they buy into its conclusions and the kinds of interventions that can be created through it. And this heuristic here just kind of demonstrates maybe some of the ways of engaging with stakeholders in community work. So the bottom right-hand corner, maybe being regular participatory planning or discussions, which have these typical results of developing high consensus about problems, but maybe not as much on how to solve or achieve goals in those problems areas. Whereas in the top right here, we have high understanding of what is causing those problems, and we have developed consensus about what causes those problems in the processes that would lead to effective solutions. So there's many ways to do participatory modeling, from system dynamics models to object-oriented models or agent-based models. But what we did with the students here was use fuzzy cognitive maps, which is a technique that was developed by Bart Kosko in the mid-'80s, which is very simple to use and uses the soft programming language and fuzzy logic similar to the way that humans make decisions. And then it uses an analytical mechanics from graph theory and network analysis to look at the structure of how people think the system operates, but also how it functions. So about being able to simulate out how an action in one part of the system flows to other aspects. And this allows us to first visualize that structure of the system and reflect on what we know about it and use it as a boundary object to facilitate discussion, but also then highlight how that system responds to change and feedback. And then the real kicker here on the bottom here is that we have a way to translate these very qualitative static models into semi-quantitative dynamic models, so we can see how things might change over time. And so a fuzzy cognitive map is very simple. There's only three components. One is the state variables, or the stocks, which just need to be things that can go up or down over time. The connections between them that are represented as these causal lines that we see. And then the third feature being how strong are those causal connections. And with that, you are then given this network that you can explore structurally. So what is the most central concept? What is a driving concept, and what is a receiving concept? But then also you can change a state variable and then see how that flows through the network of variables in these kinds of scenarios, which the students will go through. But it allows you to predict what amounts of change could be anticipated and where to focus those times of changes. And now I will hand it over to, I think, Megah and Radhia, but I will.
Hi, everyone. Oh, thank you, Kyle. My name is Megah, and I'm one of the student leaders on this project. And I'll be sharing a little bit about the student experience and just the progression with the project so far. So we initially kicked off the project by recruiting student leaders across campus, and we have students from a variety of avenues, such as Center of Community Outreach, Phi Delta Epsilon, and the Honors Program, just to name a few. But these students have also gone on to recruit their own peers to help them with their individual models. So Kyle, if you would go to the next slide. Thank you. So from our modeling workshops, which we host every Wednesday and Thursday for a total of 4 hours in a week, we have created this using our student volunteers. As you can see, as Kyle explained, with the different modeling factors and such, we have all of these interconnected relationships defining the student experience this year. And we focused on 3 main nodes, which was mental health, COVID cases, and virtual learning. And those, perfect. And you could see those are really interconnected. And we chose those just because they are the defining factors of the student experience currently this year. And one factor that really stood out to us was mental fatigue. And I think it's important to have those student voices through our volunteers, because we were able to learn terms like that and note the differences between mental health, mental fatigue, and really know what students were going through. And I'm also new to the modeling world, so these sessions have been great for me, and students have also expressed that they have been really beneficial to allow them to express kind of what they have been feeling and what their experience has been with this year and visually really see it. And I think Radhia in the next slide will be able to explain some of the relationships and the strength of them and just kind of what they have been and what students have shown us. And from these modeling workshops, students are now encouraged to create their own models and share it with us to really highlight their own experiences on a personal level. And we encourage them to also use the 3 nodes of mental health, COVID cases, and virtual learning to really guide their model as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Radhia, and I wanted to start discussing the model more in depth. And the first thing that I wanted to do was highlight the outcome variable. So the process of discussing and talking with students revealed this value as drive, passion, and motivation for education. This is known as the outcome variable. It emerged from engaging with students throughout the various sessions, and you can see how mental health, virtual learning, not having breaks, and access to on-campus mentors and on-campus entertainment all affected the students' drive. So this value is what we used as a jumping off point to continue this work to develop interventions. And it also highlights the importance of including the student voice to talk about the different things that are important to them. Okay, so modeling allowed us to not only just gain the student's perspective, but it showed what they thought were important. And it also revealed the things that may have gotten overlooked or were misunderstood. It empowered students to develop and brainstorm their own interventions that could easily be implemented on our campus. And I wanted to share some of these early interventions that the students developed. So the first one over here that we're looking at is creating university-hosted Zoom study sessions and spaces. So as you can see, this intervention actually decreased the need for students to look for coping strategies to deal with their isolation due to online and virtual learning. This also increased student access to on-campus mentors. This increased engagement with faculty while also decreasing large in-person, unsocially distanced get-togethers and parties. And it also increased our outcome variable, which is the students' drive, passion, and motivation for education. So our next intervention, on the next slide, is providing the traditional breaks, such as spring break. And according to this model, this decreased the prevalence of large social get-togethers and parties and the need for finding new coping strategies, substance abuse, and social anxiety, all the while increasing mental health and the students' drive, passion, and motivation for education. Our third intervention on the next slide is decreasing the spread of misinformation. So this decreased COVID cases and increased social distancing and mask wearing on campus. And it also decreased the effects of emotionally draining and damaging media coverage while increasing the rate of the COVID vaccine distribution. And our final intervention that I wanted to highlight is creating opportunities and facilitating spaces for students to connect with their professors outside of their Zoom classes. This last intervention satiates the students' needs for social interaction and increases their on-campus access to mentors and their drive, passion, and motivation for education. All of these interventions were created by students, and they figured that these were easy and attainable ways to get some stuff done on campus related to COVID-19.
Thank you. Ward, if you want to go next, I think you can.
Great. I do not have slides for everybody, but what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about our ambition as part of the FAC group to do some research in the realm of focus groups to understand more about the student experience. And I need to thank Donna Ginther and the rest of the FAC team as well as Susan Mercer and Kafaya Mahmoud, who conducted systematic focus groups for us in the winter. And I think you'll see that some of the themes that Dr. Francisco and the students, Kafaya or Megah, Radhia, and Kyle as postdoc have just shared with us in terms of mental health, COVID cases, and virtual learning as themes that are resonant in the focus groups. KU, being essentially a small city, has a wide diversity of people who've had a wide diversity of experiences through COVID. And we wanted to understand with our focus groups what we had ambitions to look at lots of different groups on campus, but we started with GTAs because GTAs have a particularly unique experience and were encountering COVID both on an instructional basis where they were responsible for fostering learning, but also going through their own learning experience. We were very interested in first year experiences during COVID, starting college at this time being very, very different than already having been here and making the transition, as well as trying to understand some of what was going on in Greek life and in the broader party scene, because it was very visible in the fall as a group that was non-compliant with a lot of the expectations. As we set out to recruit, Kafaya sent out scores of emails reaching out to specific individuals that partners on campus had said would be good to talk with within the GTA community, first year experience in Greek life. And there was an interesting pattern we found, even just in the willingness to participate with us in the discussions. GTAs jumped at the opportunity. We had no problem putting together panels there. First year experience students, it was hit or miss in terms of trying to get first year students involved. And there was complete radio silence from the Greek life students. So I can talk a little bit then about the GTAs. Themes that came up in their discussions, senses being isolated, I think, which all of us in different ways have experienced, that there was lots of variation by school within the university and by the type of teaching experience that the student was, the GTA was engaged in. If you were doing, especially if you're doing hybrid learning, trying to teach online and in person was extremely taxing on GTAs. And I think we all are probably aware that in academia, a lot of folks just don't get pedagogy training. And so to be asked not only to teach, but if you had independence and requirements to teach hybrid and in person, that was a big ask for faculty and instructors and a big ask for GTAs. GTAs struggled also with variation based, I think, in some ways on how their own advisor in their master's or doctoral work interacted with them. Some that had really proactive advisors who really reached out to them and supported them, transitioned through this period probably better than those whose advisors did not reach out and say, hey, how are you doing? How are you managing with all that's on your plate? There was some sense too that some of the doctoral students and master students that were GTAs, that the university treated them like sacrificial lambs. We know that faculty and instructors pushed back on being compelled to teach in person, but GTAs in many cases perceived that they had no choice to say, I don't want to be in the classroom, that their power in the system was so limited, they're so vulnerable on multiple levels, that they were teaching in person whether they wanted to or not, and whether they observed their students coming to class and not complying with the expectations. Last things out of the GTA group that was important, there are other things that are important, but one that stood out to me was immediately the students seeing and perceiving that while CV Key and KU's testing regimen were well-intentioned, that there were so many gaps in their enforcement, in essence, that students just didn't really have to comply. And so they provided some sense of kind of hygiene theater, and that there wasn't a lot of trust that it was actually doing much to keep them safer in the classroom or on campus. There were some similar themes from the first year students: isolation, a sense of real loss, which is, I think we've all had different parts of our lives that we've felt lost because of COVID, That transition to college, the sense of having independence perhaps for the first time was lost. Having to mask and social distance at a time in life which you're in a hyper phase of forming new relationships with likely to be different people than you might have experienced in your high school was really compromised, and there was something missing there. They saw and acknowledged that on campus a lot of people were compliant, but you took just a little bit of steps off campus and there wasn't compliance by students with the social distancing expectations. Same thing as pertains to the CV key in the testing, that good ideas, but there were too many kind of escape valves. And one thing that came up, I think I should have mentioned for GTAs and the first year experience students, was that in the decision-making frameworks within KU that, and this fits with the 4-quadrant slide that Kyle showed, is that decisions were made and then there was communication sent out that was more about, we're going to inform you what's about to happen to you, rather than having diversity of involvement in decision-making, and that's problematic. Last thing, in terms of the Greek life, while there were not folks that participated in our focus groups, very fortunate to build relationships with Ethan Stubbs and the staff he works with, and Jane Tuttle, who have responsibility overseeing parts of student life and Greek life. And they allowed me to help get in and talk with subgroups within me personally, not through a formal focus group, but one of the things, there lots of things came up in that, but one thing that I thought was very interesting is after Greek life was very visible in the fall as being non-compliant, there was a sort of bunker mentality and a cone of silence that developed. And so it really inhibited communication because that group perceived itself to being wrongly cast with a broad brush. And so the message within the groups was, don't talk to anybody about COVID outside of our group. We're just going to kind of close down and navigate this on our own. So those are a few of the things that we saw from the focus groups and the work around the focus groups. And with that, I will pass it back over to Emily. Thanks for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I think you provided a really interesting array of information. This is where I come in and remind everybody in the audience that you have an opportunity to ask questions in using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And I'll ask all the panelists to turn their videos back on so that we can answer some questions. And I think I might just start with one while we're waiting for the first one to come in, which I think is directed more to Radhia and Megah. And it's a question about, based on what you learned through those slides and the different interventions, if you were to advise programmers or administrators or anybody on campus who has any capacity to offer opportunities to students going forward after we're back in person and online isn't the norm, but could be an add-on, like an additional benefit for folks, how might you advise them to think about, or me, for example, too, in terms of what we can offer to students and how we're doing it through different channels? You noted the opportunity to have access, direct contact with faculty members outside of the classroom, for example, as one thing.
I guess I can start with that one. The advice that I would give to faculty or administration who is interested in engaging with students on this topic, I would just encourage them to invite students to that conversation, because I feel like our perspective would be valuable in the sense that, we're living on the day-to-day, like we're on the ground and we see what our peers may need. And we could also provide some insight from the student leader perspective, from organizing events on campus or engaging with other students and inviting them to, programs such as HARC. I saw that once that bridge was built for honors students, a lot more other students have also came to engage with the research. And this has also provided students a way to, engage with professors outside of the classroom setting. And it also did alleviate some Zoom fatigue because we got to talk with professors about things that we weren't forced to talk about and things that were actually interesting to us.
I would agree. I think just having that empathy and patience with students, just because Zoom fatigue is really real, and just hitting that pandemic wall is also really real. So just having different avenues to reach out to them and kind of see how they're doing and what their needs are at the time, because they've just fluctuated throughout this whole year personally. And so I think that really helps. And I know Radhia and I did talk about Zoom study breaks and stuff like that. And even though Zoom fatigue is real, I think having that connection with peers outside of a classroom setting is really nice, and having that be optional, but still knowing that there's that human interaction there is just great.
Thank you. And just a very practical question. What were the channels that you used that were effective in terms of reaching your peers for feedback?
We did a lot of plugging in student organizations that focused on service work, such as the Center for Community Outreach. We also reached out to Heal KU, which is another service-based organization. We tried to align the project as much to their interests as we could, and we knew that those were the types of groups that had students who were interested in engaging with creating programs to help other students on campus.
Okay, great, thank you. And then a question that maybe goes to Vincent and Kyle, although you're all willing or able to pass it to others if you would rather do that, but a question about the role of relationships that existed, whether they existed pre-COVID or have formed as a result of COVID, how they can be built during a crisis.
Great question. And there's a big answer to that, or maybe many answers to that. Because the context changed, people who had relationships may have lost them because of the significant context change, or they may have changed. And I think to the extent that you're proactive in reaching out to continue them and maybe redefine them, or continue to communicate in ways that allow for new avenues of connection, then you're successful. And to the extent that you're limited in that ability, then you're less successful and you become a little bit more marginalized. But that also opens up doors and avenues for new relationships to be built. Everybody needs them, and we can't be successful on our own. It's just the whole idea of a person pulling themselves up by the bootstraps is an absolute myth. And it's really important for us to have collective action to make a difference. Now, shared constructs and having a shared idea of what to do moving forward, that's the point of tools like this. There are many. That's actually the point for the community toolbox, especially all of the assessment features of that. Now, this kind of modeling is not in there yet. We're working on that. Kyle and I have an agenda for that, but it's really important, I think, to create as many different tools and opportunities for people to engage, whether it's over Zoom like this, which does have its challenges, or in other ways, outside, face-to-face, things like that. But I know Kyle has got a different perspective on this too. Different, not in a bad way, different, and in a he's got a different experience, and I really look forward to hearing what he says about this too.
I feel like that kind of caught me off guard, but especially being new to Lawrence as like an individual, and being like, oh, how do you even reach out and like make a research community has been pretty tricky. But this made me kind of think about network science a little bit, and like the strength of community usually being that you have friends and colleagues and people that care about you who also know each other. But right now we might be making connections, but we're making these like weak ties where we're not having the closure of knowing people who also know each other. And like there's where a sense of community can come from. And seeing the students interact building these models and kind of like struggle with their understanding being different from having different experiences. To me, it was like, oh, they're coming together around concepts and constructs, which could also be a sense of community. And I got pretty excited by that, especially last night's session. It seemed like there was a shared cultural experience through modeling that was kind of being created, and maybe opportunities for them to engage with each other moving forward as well. But yeah.
I'm so, can I I just want to, I so appreciate this language because as a network science kind of person and the weak ties and strong ties, there's so many people, not just first year students who either came here anew and are struggling to feel connected in a community. I mean, one of the great things about a university are the multiple layers of the ways that we get to interact also in the classroom, in research, in service, through teaching, and so many of those became fragmented. And there's so many fewer of those in-between moments, right? Normally after a session like this, if you're in person, 3 or 4 people would be chatting over here and somebody say, let me go introduce you to this person over here, and breakout rooms can't do that. And I think a lot of us, because we know that the Zoom fatigue is real, we try to rush through a lot of the Zoom stuff, whereas sometimes I've found Zoom things that allow people to just talk are very appreciated. Zoom things where there's a lecture are barely tolerated. But that I think it should make us also think about the different forms of vulnerability. If we know anything from disasters, and if we know anything from community health, it's that those who are most vulnerable before suffer the worst during these kinds of experiences. And vulnerability is not always visually obvious. And that's a real challenge for us, especially when people start chasing bottom lines. So thanks for those points.
I was actually going to pitch to you next because you're who taught me the term weak ties. So I thought the mention of that would be something that perked your ears up. We do have an audience question for Megah and Radhia. Did you see different trends in terms of students' responses based on the year of school that they were in?
I did see, I don't know if it's different for Radhia, but just because I knew a lot of the student volunteers, I do know that they are second year students. And I wonder if it's from them comparing their first year and then their second year being so different. And that's all that they've known is their first year. I think just having that response, and they really want to help because they have 2 years left. So I think they really want to improve their experience with that. So that's what I kind of saw, but unless Radhia knows of other levels that we've seen.
One thing that I thought was interesting was talking to the students who have experience with working with different organizations. They use the mentality of, okay, we're going to create an event like we would for our organization. And that's how the idea of the Zoom study spaces came about. I think through different social medias and different, I kind of just like maneuvering through like the Zoom world, they had to figure out ways to engage their members. And through those experiences, they applied that to the modeling workshop and then came up with creating Zoom study spaces or creating spaces for students by students. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes, definitely really interesting. And earlier, Kyle, you had mentioned in terms of last night's session, knowing that people might be interested in connecting further after that. Were those participants who were offering data, or I just don't know which session you're referring to. I guess that's partly what I'm asking. And I'm wondering if the community toolbox offers tools for them to stay in touch, if that's the case.
Kyle's having some technical difficulties. He'll be back. His computer is really old. Let me jump into that one. And while he's getting back into this, Kyle, speak up if your mic comes back to life. So Wednesday and Thursday evenings, we've been kind of really doing training workshops more than anything else for student leaders that are going to be working with their students. We had a couple last week. We had one last night. And the one that was last night was priceless. I partly wish we recorded it because the collaboration and the thoughtfulness about the strong and weak ties of variables related to the development of relationships, the improvements or the decline in mental health outcomes, willingness to engage in solutions with each other. It was just brilliant. And so it was, it's so much richer than what we can paint within this thing. And we've got another one tonight, and the students are reaching out to their friends. There were a few new people last night, and they're going out into their networks, pulling together some models And it's really not so much data as much as there are these models, there's the experience that the students are having that is amazingly empowering. Like one of the students last night was saying, she had no idea just how relieving it was to be able to just talk to a bunch of peers and come up with these variables, put some language about what she's experiencing, and then figure out how it is that we can do interventions. So there's no interventions yet, but the ideas, there are several other ideas that were presented today that kind of came magically out of playing around with that model and a couple of tools in that mentalmodeler.org that Kyle and some of his colleagues up in Michigan had really kind of facilitated the development of. And yeah, it's just getting started. Wish we had been able to do this 6 months ago, but within the next several weeks, it's going to be quite impressive. And so we'll be pulling together a report and some findings, and hopefully continuing this in some other ways, because as school opens up, et cetera, this is only going to transition to other things. There's food security issues out there. We have students on campus that are homeless or don't have enough or don't have adequate living space, et cetera. There's a lot of issues. Hopefully it can transition to that. Hopefully we can get some funds to study it and also help facilitate the empowerment of students to do this themselves.
I think I'm back. So the only thing I would add to that is, seeing last night's workshop, the thing that really crystallized for me was when we were talking about these really hard things like food insecurity, feeling completely isolated, mental health, and you could feel that the room felt tense. But then there was people, they started sharing stories about, resources they got on TikTok. And the mood changed. People were laughing and discussing and talking and sharing their experience that was maybe difficult and hard, but now it was a little bit removed, but also shared. And it was exciting to me that the process of pulling people together to bring in their like cognitive diversity into a room, even if it was virtual, that they were then sharing something, and then it was it seemed fun. I don't know, people were laughing a lot, but they were still doing something really cognitively difficult, right? Which is like drawing these connections in this complex problem. But it seemed like they were developing a shared sense of what it's like to be a student going through this thing at KU right now, and that maybe binds them and creates some kind of social capital between them, is what I was thinking.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder that anybody can offer their questions at this point. That's very much what we're doing. And if any of you panelists have questions for each other at this point too, I'd encourage you to go ahead and ask those too.
Well, if other people are thinking of a question, I want to build on what was just being said. This issue of communication and social media and networks is vital. One of the things that came up in the focus groups was that KU's communication was one way. It was these big, long, ponderous emails that were repetitive. They didn't give the information that was wanted where it was. And it sits in tension with the fact, and I heard this as far back as last May from students who basically really felt that to get what they needed, they had to go through trauma sharing over and over and over again. Like, oh, I'm struggling because of my family and because of this, and I don't have money for internet access. And there was just this sense of like having to go through that. And I think that speaks to these expectations of the system in some ways that have an inherent kind of legalistic brand protection set up in terms of messaging and a distrust of people, where in a crisis, you sort of have to assume the best in people. And there's good research out there that people don't go out and loot in volume, and people aren't trying to game the system. They're just trying to make it day to day, right? Like we have, I mean, in the disaster world, FEMA is built, half the organization, it feels like, is just making sure that we'll spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to make sure that somebody doesn't get 50 cents more than they're owed or that they deserve. And it's backwards. And I think sometimes that is something that this notion of care, as well as it's connecting to relationships. And so one of the cool things that's come out of this fact group is Donna Ginther and Vincent and Yvonne Chin from journalism, and a few of us connected a group of students and faculty in marketing and journalism who are right now working on thinking about ways to do messaging that both in terms of the mediums and the types of message can get out, because peer-to-peer is way more valuable I mean, I can tell students anything, but if they hear it from their peer, it's going to be way more valuable in terms of behavior impact.
So if I could build on that too, one of the interventions that folks came up with last night, and it's not very well developed yet, but everybody was asking for TikTok posts for the communication from the administration to the students, because that's in a soundbite. It's in just enough so that it matches their attention span, and it's fun, and it's a good way for them to connect. So there's going to be more of that, and unless you talk to students, you won't get that kind of feedback.
That actually might lead into this next question we have from the audience too. Do you think that all social media has helped students feel united or more, or is it possible too that they've felt more isolated as a result of it? And if I've misinterpreted this question, please feel free to re-enter it, but that's how I'm reading it. That is to say, does some forms of social media help create more sense of community and unity, and some feel a little bit more isolating?
This is actually something we talked about last night, and what we found was that one social media we talked about last night was TikTok, and I think that was just because we recognized that, you know, Zoom fatigue and like being online and all that, like our attention span had just decreased. So having TikToks of like those sub TikToks, like, or the different sides of TikToks that we'd go on, I feel like having conversation with my peers last night showed that there was like a sense of connection between us, because we were talking about, oh, I'm on this side of TikTok and you're also on that side of TikTok. We kind of bonded over that as we were talking about like COVID and, you know, our experiences on campus. And I thought that was powerful. But we also recognize that there are some downsides to social medias, and it could be harmful too. So I think recognizing that it could go both ways and using it to like its best abilities is what we were emphasizing last night.
And just to add to that, Radhia, I feel like last night people were also talking about the like coping strategies and capacities that students had would in terms of like critical thinking skills and ability to interpret and understand different forms of media coming at them would determine whether or not this was like a bonding activity where you're like getting good information and sharing, or whether you're getting like sucked into the world of conspiracy theories and finding community in maybe negative ways. And that kind of came up, and that was difficult in our modeling to kind of show that there's these different paths that could arise. But it was definitely discussed a lot.
This really connects to issues that are true for everything, and that is power and sincerity in relationships and things, because when it comes to social media, there were some people that were very glad to see students that were out partying be held accountable, right? That this is visual and we need to not act like this isn't happening because it's right off campus. There were other people that felt like it's unfair that somebody is putting our behavior that's not good out there and we're being held accountable. And so that's about privilege and power, and like, who's being accountable for what in this interplay. I mean, we saw it with in the moment of the unrest, right, over last summer around racial violence, and how digital media and social media can help hold people accountable, and that people who have power don't like that, right? Because the behaviors have to change and they're visible. And the same can be true in terms of the messaging. Like, if a message isn't perceived as being sincere, it can be cool or hip or whatever. But if you, I mean, we had a high profile issue where someone on campus in an administrative power like blocked someone on social media, which creates distrust. And so I think it's really important what's being said, that it's not necessarily the medium, it's the power dynamics, the sincerity, and the relationship. If it's being used to foster relationships rather than create the appearance. I mean, the hygiene theater has been a critique through all of this. I will do the things to make people look and feel safe. And I think that communication and inclusion and diversity theater, people are not appreciative of that at all.
Okay, so looking at the time, this is one last call if the audience wants to offer any questions, but I'm going to pose one now, which is maybe you can choose which way you want to answer this. But coming from the Commons, we're deeply invested, of course, in having interdisciplinary conversations. And so my question is, if you, recognizing that you were a team of scholars from across different disciplines anyway, if there were other disciplines that you haven't been able to hear from, whether that's designers or artists or, you know, a lot of the disciplines that I'm thinking of, you're already representing, so I won't say those. But if there's somebody else who you could add to the team who you could imagine would like lend something very important to the conversation, what that would be. Or the other way you can answer this question, if this is better for you, is what is the value added of having so many volunteers among all of these students across different disciplines and the perspectives that they're bringing as a result of that? And this question goes to anybody who wants it.
Can I answer the second one first? And then I would love to hear what Megah and Radhia have to say about the first part, about the diversity and backgrounds that we need to gather. The more students we can get engaged in this, the better. And we don't know what we don't know. This is not about statistical sample size. This is about coverage. And you can do a statistically random sample and completely miss what it is that you want to get, because that you just didn't find those people and they were in another location. Well, students can get to each other. And that's a difference. You know, Ward was talking about power dynamics. This is it. You know, it's like, have students engage in this and talk to each other to develop these models. It empowers them. It's an intervention in itself. It builds relationships, builds trust, and we learn a ton in the whole process that leads to intervention and other science. This is community assessment. And the more you can get people engaged, the better. Radhia, Megah?
As for getting people involved, I think this project is open to everyone from all disciplines. We're all collectively living through this COVID era, and I think what everyone has to say is valuable. So this isn't limited to just one group of people. This is open to everyone.
I would agree. I would say that all voices are welcome, and we actually would love to hear from anyone and everyone. Just someone's like a perspective that I personally want to hear from is a student athlete. I think there have been severely impacted through COVID-19. And so I think it'd be really interesting learning about how they are adjusting to all the changes at KU.
Megah, to that point, we heard nothing. We got crickets back when we tried to connect with the athletic enterprise to do focus groups. And I think that there's probably some power issues at hand there too, because Vincent and I talked in the fall. We ended up getting some connection with some of the leadership in the state about how to navigate the election and post-election pivots around COVID. And I think one of the hard things is that you got to go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
And in a crisis, there is urgency psychologically to get back to normal. But the systems that are normal are what got you in those problems often. And so slowing down, especially to think about who we're not talking to, the system's not built for that, but that is 100% what the system needs. Yeah. And that takes, I mean, we had to fight to get this group to exist. But how much effort does that mean for a student or anybody who's already struggling on multiple levels to have to fight to get in the conversation and then to not be taken seriously once they're there? That's one of the big challenges we face. And that's why one of the reasons I love the Commons is because you're constantly kind of probing and keeping the searchlight going. Who's not in the conversation and how do we get the cross conversation going? Because it just doesn't happen on its own.
And I just wanted to pop in with the way we started this project was with a discussion about collective intelligence and how to fully understand this complex system. The key to that is diversity of knowledge and how we could be really successful in coming up with a model, but we could get a bonus out of that model if we had more and more and more diversity in the understanding. So we started with this intention to try to see the system from as many perspectives as possible, and knowing that all the models will be wrong, but together they could be better than any expert model in terms of how diverse of a perspective we could add in. So something we've been considering.
I'm going to quote you on that. I'm glad this is being recorded. Thank you. Also, the notion that you just presented to Vincent in terms of you can't know what you don't know, and how will you until you invite other perspectives in. Are there ways that we can keep up with the work that you're doing, whether that's through social media or something like that?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure, but let's keep talking and
Okay.
we'll find ways. I mean,
Perfect.
we'll get it out there. Radhia is going to be writing up a report. This is part of her McNeil Scholar project. And both Radhia and Megah are also in a class together, Building Healthy Communities, undergraduate course that I teach Tuesday afternoons. And we got like 63 students in that in this spring. And breakout rooms, really engaged, project development, community assessment. This is one of those projects.
Wonderful. Well, I could see you advising technology developers to have a better version of Zoom for the future too, so that can be more integrated. But thank you all so much. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot, and I think that I'm seeing the same based on the comments that we're getting too. So recording will be posted, and I will let everybody who's here know when that's available. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon, evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.